most clearly derived from simple ideas of reflection on the relationships between our mental states, on the relationship between my willing and then affirming something, or on the relationship between my deciding to do something and then physically doing it. Because I see that there is some sort of correlation going on between willing and doing, I assume there's some sort of causal connection between the mind that wills and the body that does. So the idea of causal power arises as a complex idea that we suppose represents what goes on between mind and body. Now, you notice in the way I describe that, a distinction between there being correlations between two events and there being connection between two events. Correlation, if you like, conjunction. They are there in conjunction. But is there any connection? You see. Now, says Locke, the idea of a connection just arises, and we voluntarily affirm it, the idea of causal power. Now, it's precisely that which David Hume is going to criticize. It's crucial. Because in this representational view, how do you know there is an external world? Whether it be a world of material things, a world of other minds, or a world in which God is included, how do you know those things exist? Unless it is by a cause-effect argument. Here's the effect, the ideas, here is the cause, those external things. Now, you can only use a cause-effect argument if you know there's a cause-effect connection, you see. Whereas, in fact, all you know in your ideas is the correlation, the conjunction. You don't know the connection. So a couple of weeks from now, when you're reading David Hume, you'll hear him saying that all there is to this idea of power is the idea of constant conjunction. We have no empirical basis at all for affirming any causal connection. And he becomes a skeptic about knowing anything about causal power. Now, what's that going to do to Newtonian science? Where everything is understood in terms of forces, causal power. What's it going to do to the possibility of knowing anything about the material world? Knowing anything about other minds or God, if you can't have causal arguments? You see? So what he's doing then with complex ideas like the idea of power is crucial. The idea of substance, likewise. As you read Locke, notice carefully the way he talks about substance on pages 186 and again 189, whether it be material substance or whether it be mental substance, immaterial mind, spirit, soul. You see, what we have in our simple ideas is simply ideas of certain qualities, primary qualities, secondary qualities. Where does the idea of substance come from? Well, it's an idea of something which has those qualities. You see? You get the idea of material substance by putting primary quality ideas together. It is something, I know not what, that has those qualities. And the way Locke talks about material substance then is simply to call it something I know not what. Sickle. And he talks of spiritual substance, mind or soul, the same way. It's something that has mental properties. Something I know not what. Now, obviously, somebody like Hume is going to make hay out of that. You see. Yeah. Or try again the concept of infinity. We don't have the actual paragraphs that deal with that in our selection, but in the full text he discusses the idea of infinity, a complex idea. How do we get the idea of infinity from simple ideas? Well, if we're talking of space being infinite, as Newton did, what we're talking of is a point beyond this point, beyond this point, beyond this point, and so on, as we say, ad infinitum. The idea of infinity is a complex idea developed by that process of extrapolation, an endless extrapolation. And similarly with the idea of infinite time, extrapolation. And so that's the way the Newtonian conceptions of space and time are accounted for, absolute infinite space and time. Complex ideas derived from simple ideas of particular points in space, particular periods of time. And he says that that's the way in which we get the idea of God as a spirit who is infinite. I mentioned that Locke's father was one of the signatories of the Westminster Confession of Faith. That Westminster Confession defines God as a spirit, infinite in wisdom, goodness, love, and power. It defines the human person as a spirit, finite in wisdom, goodness, love, and power. God as a spirit, infinite in the same regards. Well, how do you get the idea of an infinite God? How do you get the idea of God? By extrapolation from our ideas of the wisdom, goodness, love, and power which human minds exert. Extrapolating that to infinite wisdom, infinite goodness, infinite love, infinite power, and you have the idea of an infinite being. That's how the idea of God develops. Complex idea. So he tries to account in that way for the whole kind of mental apparatus, conceptual apparatus, which we have, in keeping with his basic conviction that we have no innate idea of God or of anything else, that all of our ideas ultimately are derived from experience, that is to say, from simple ideas of sensation and reflection. Complex ideas. Comment? Yeah, Esther.
Complex ideas have no guarantee of being absolutely correct.
Right.
Because they've already experienced the secondary.
Some of them at least have,
right,
yeah.
Secondary qualities of your simple ideas.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that you're actually seeing a correct representation of your copy of reality? Like, how do you know?
Mm-hmm. How do you know that what you think is correct?
Yeah, I mean, how is it
Yeah.
justify that your simple ideas?
Yeah. Could you hold on to that till we get down there? Because he makes a distinction that, you know, is as old as Plato between knowledge and opinion, knowledge and belief. And in effect, he's going to say that there are different degrees of knowledge. And the third degree that he calls opinion, belief, is what applies to knowledge of material things. In other words, you don't have certainty.
But I mean, even as far as spatial things like that is a square or a cubic object.
Yeah.
That's been learned. You don't see that and know that.
That's right, and he's willing to admit it. That's a matter of opinion. Yeah. There are things that we can know, but only some things. Well, look here, since you've raised that, let's jump ahead and pick that up while it's hot. What he does in talking about knowledge and belief is to distinguish three kinds of knowledge: knowledge of the first kind, second kind, third kind. And you can track this down for yourself. Pages 198 to 201, thereabouts. Knowledge of the first kind is by intuition. Knowledge of the second kind is by demonstration. Demonstration. Knowledge of the third kind is by sensation. Sensory means. These three kinds. Now, intuition is what we know immediately, by immediate awareness. We only have knowledge where there is immediate knowledge rather than representational knowledge. Okay? You only have intuitive knowledge when it's known immediately rather than by representation. Well, what do we know then that's intuitive? You see? Well, what you know that is intuitive is that A equals A. In other words, laws of logic. And applications of the laws of logic that you get, for instance, in mathematics, where the three angles of a triangle add up to two right angles. You say, is that intuitive? Well, in the final analysis it is. After it's worked out, it comes through intuitively. So the intuitive is what is immediately self-evident. If you like, the fact that I now have a sensation of blueness, that would be intuitive. But that there is a blue object out there in the real world, that's not intuitive. Demonstration, knowledge by demonstration of the second kind, is what we know as a result of logical demonstration, logical proof, with certainty. In other words, if you have certain intuitive premises, self-evident premises, first principles, you can deduce certain things, prove it. And as I indicated in the mathematical example, each step in the proof must come through with intuitive certainty. You see. But again, that's not dealing with what is representational unless the proof is such as to get beyond the representation to reality itself. But how in a deductive proof do you get external reality in a conclusion if it's not in one of the premises? You see, in no syllogism can you have in the conclusion something which is not involved in one of the premises. Problem. So if we're talking about knowledge of the external world, we are consigned to knowledge of a third kind.